Hi, my name is Kate, and I love to read. Like, I was carrying books around with me before Kindles were a thing. So I decided to start a podcast where I interview the authors of some of my favorite books, ask them all of my questions so that I can read between the lines of the books. Welcome back to another episode of Between the Lines. I'm here today with Amina Akhtar to talk about her amazing book, Kismet. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I love talking to people who've read my book because it's crazy.
Yeah.
I spent 2 years working on this book in my bedroom with my dog, and now people are reading it. And it's like,
Yes.
what? That's crazy.
It has to be like a different kind of like mind-blowing.
It is. Yeah, launching a book is really a strange experience
Yeah.
because all of a sudden this book that very few people know about or have read are giving you their opinions on it, and you're like, okay, thank you. Like,
Cool.
I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go hide.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you're getting mostly good reviews because it's what it deserves, but I know you get everything.
Everybody's different and everyone has different likes. Yeah.
So when did you know that you wanted to be an author?
Since I was a kid, I wanted to write. I would write these ridiculous little stories and poems and what have you. But, you know, I come from an immigrant family, and it was always really stressed to me that, okay, if you're not going to go to medical school and you're not going to go to law school, whatever you choose to do, you have to make a living. So I was like, all right, that's what I'm going to do. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to get my MFA and write a novel. That was not an option for me. So I went into journalism. And I mean, like, high school newspaper, straight to NYU, full on focused journalism. And right out of university, I got a job at Vogue, which was a surprise because I'm not a Vogue girl. I think this was like 1999, and I was in combat boots and I had spiked hair. Like, guys, I was so not a Vogue person, right? And I've got big boobs and I'm short and I'm brown, like the opposite of what a Vogue person is, right? So I call Vogue and Condé Nast my finishing school because I learned how to wear heels. I learned how to do makeup. I learned how to do hair. All these things I should have known already. I did not. And then, once you are in an area of journalism, a genre, let's say, you kind of get pigeonholed, right? So I basically stayed in fashion, and I love fashion, but I was never like a diehard person for it. There are people who study fashion and historians who are brilliant, and I was just like, oh, look, they're giving me a job. This is awesome.
Right.
Yeah, I can pay my rent.
Yes.
And then, I was really on the digital side. I helped launch the Cut blog. I was working at Elle.com. I've worked at Style.com. May it rest in peace. Basically, any fashion website, I probably had my fingers in it. There was brand work, all this stuff. But then in like 2013, as we've seen, like, a lot of publications started to shutter, and not just shutter, but slim down.
Mm-hmm.
And I got laid off from Elle, and which was a blessing at the time because my mom had passed and I was just not a functioning human. I just was like, what do I do with my life?
Right.
But people, oh shoot, let me turn my email off. There you go. No loud chimes in my ear. Okay. And at the time it was really weird because people were writing blog posts about my layoff, and I was like, how does anyone know who I am? Like, I just felt really exposed. I had all this anger and grief because my mom had died, and like, I needed to do something with it.
Yeah.
So I wrote my first book in which I murder everybody in the fashion industry.
Yes.
Not very subtle. Not
No.
subtle at all. I'm not a subtle person.
No.
And it was really cathartic. It was just this most amazing experience of getting all these emotions out of me. And once I'd written it, I felt like a new person again. I felt like I could go out into the world again and not be a complete mess. Like, I was a hot mess at the time,
Yeah.
And then that book got rejected by every publisher for about two and a half years.
Oh my gosh.
Because it's basically Devil Wears Prada meets American Psycho, right?
Right.
So the main character, and this is not a spoiler, from the get-go, she's a crazy serial killer.
Right.
But she does it in high heels.
Yes.
As one does.
Yes.
So it's really just tongue-in-cheek. I took a lot of what was my experience in fashion and put it into this book.
Yeah.
So then I was like, well, I kind of, messed around in New York for a couple more years. And then I was like, my dad's by himself in Arizona. I can't find a stable job. Let's just kill two birds with one stone here and go out to him and see what happens,
Mm-hmm.
go for 6 months.
Yeah.
And it's now been 6 years. It's been the best thing ever. Like if you had told me like living with my 88-year-old dad was going to be like the highlight of my life, I don't think I would have believed you, but here I am.
Yeah. That's
And
cool.
you know what? We live on a mountain outside Sedona. It's
Nice.
beautiful. I don't see people very often. I see wild animals everywhere, and it's
Yes.
beautiful. And I thought I really need to set a murder out here. That was my
Yes.
main thought. Like,
Yeah.
let's kill people in this beautiful
Yes.
setting.
Yes. I think authors and readers alike would love the idea of seeing wild animals and not many people.
Listen, I was just back in New York for my launch,
Hmm.
and I'm still in recovery. Like, it was overwhelming for me.
Yeah.
And I thought I was going to be a diehard New Yorker, and
Oh,
I
yeah.
was just like, I need to hide in my hotel. I can't be near people. This is a lot. So
Yeah.
I'm really glad that I can do it in small bursts and then come back and hide.
Yeah. That's awesome. So you come from kind of a journalism background. Did that
Yeah.
transcend into your writing of novels, or what's your writing process with your books?
The first one, yes, because I was writing mostly digital stuff, right? Blog posts and what have you. So you're writing short
Hmm.
bursts with lots of personality. So that's kind of how, and I'd never written a book. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do. So I literally would just sit down and write 300 words. And then I would take those 300 words the next day and add to it and just keep adding and adding until I would get to 1,000 or 2,000, and it would start to
Yeah.
add up.
Yeah.
That was the process in the beginning.
Hmm.
Now I'm a little more streamlined. I'm not the best plot like outliner.
Yeah.
I always know what the beginning is, and I always know what the end is.
Yeah.
It's that middle part, I
Yes.
just kind of let go wild. Like I just let the crazy fly. And as if you've read my books, it's a little out there.
Yeah.
And I kind of am open to letting the characters dictate what their lives are going to be in these stories.
Okay.
So that's sort of where I am now, which is
Mhm.
a good place.
Yeah.
My process is literally sitting at my computer with my doggy who's next to me,
Yeah.
and I have my coffee and I just write.
Yeah.
I write for a couple hours, and sometimes it's 500 words and sometimes it's 5,000. It's whatever I can do
Hmm.
is great. And then I get very stoned afterwards because my brain just is fried, and I lie
Yeah.
down and I hang out with the dog. And I
Yes.
usually at that's the kind of when like I always call it the back brain. It's sort of like when you're about to fall asleep and you get that
Yeah.
brilliant idea and you don't write it down. I
Yes.
write it down. I always write those down, and those are the same things that happen when I get stoned. Is I'll get a plot point. I'll figure it out, or
Yeah.
I'll get a line in my head um, uh, of dialogue, and I'm like, oh, I need them to say it, and I literally
Hmm.
put it in my notes app, which is filled with great, and it's also filled with like book ideas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody ever steal my phone, please.
Right.
Uh, and like letting your brain, yeah, right. If I lose that, I'm in trouble. Uh, it's like letting your conscious brain shut off
Hmm.
so that you're not overthinking, and then the idea will come to you and like the solution comes to me. And so that's sort of how it works.
I love
My
that approach.
very lazy stoner girl process.
I love that. I really, really love that a lot. I mean, I know what you're talking about because it's kind of like sometimes they tell you when you're working on a problem and you just can't solve it to like even
Mhm.
like go for a walk, do something else, and then it just
Do
pops
something
up.
else. Go for a walk, clean the house, do
Yes.
anything.
Yes.
And it's getting out of your head and basically getting out of your own way.
Yeah.
So this has been a learning curve for me to get out of my own way and
Yeah.
let the story unfold.
That's cool. And smoking definitely helps you get out of your like front brain and get into your back brain. So I have to agree with you there.
Yes, yeah. Well, I have chronic migraines,
Me
so
too.
I found that thankfully I live in a legal state, and so
Yeah.
it really helps me take fewer painkillers because I would
Yep.
like to save my liver for later.
Yep.
So it's definitely very beneficial. And after staring at a computer for a couple hours and writing, I usually have a headache kicking in.
Yep.
So it's like, all right, well, what are you gonna do?
Yes. Yes. I'm with you on that. So you said you kind of
Mhm.
just like let the characters kind of figure it out as you're writing it. do you do any planning on the
Yeah,
characters beforehand, or do you also just kind of know who they are and
I
go with it?
do. It's more like I figure out their personalities and like
Mm-hmm.
the things they would like. Um, like with Ronnie, my sad Ronnie, I love her.
Yeah,
In
I
my
do
head,
too.
I literally would call her sad Ronnie.
Yeah,
Because she's a doormat at the beginning. And,
she is.
I think one of the things that was a challenge for me was how do I write somebody who would glom onto a guru, who would
Yeah,
want somebody to come save them?
yeah,
And I had to take everything away from her for her because for me, I definitely have had those moments where everything was taken away from me
yep,
by just life stuff, right?
yep,
And had a Marley person come into my life, maybe I would have been like, hey, I feel like we've all had those low moments.
yes,
So I had to make her life awful. Sorry, Ronnie.
yeah.
And she, her parents are dead. She
Mm-hmm.
lives with her aunt. And I know I'm going to get yelled at by my aunts for this, for her aunt. But really wanted to do a little commentary on auntie culture that we have in South Asian communities and how
Yeah,
the aunties are all powerful. I kind of feel like they're like the Furies,
mm-hmm.
and
Yeah,
whatever they tell your parents is what you're going to get yelled at for. So I
yeah,
wanted her aunt to just be this horrible person, just to
yeah.
like the nth degree, really just, comical.
Oh
And
yeah.
then Marley, I wanted her, oh, Marley.
Mm-hmm.
So I met a lot of wellness people, not just here, but in New York. I feel like this book could be set in New York and LA and
Yes.
Tulum, in
Oh
Bali.
my.
I just happened to set it here.
Yeah.
Um, oh yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so Marley's just like there was a shift in the fashion industry in the last like 5 to 8 years
Mm-hmm.
where a lot of the higher ups and the socialites shifted to wellness.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see the shift happening because, wellness is a multiple
Yes.
billion-dollar industry.
Right.
So it was like, let's get in on that. That's what's chic and happening now. And so that was Marley. She's an opportunist. She's
Yes.
not there to help anybody or
No.
to heal. She's there for her personal gain.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to make her as ridiculous as possible. There was a draft where I had her mother in it more.
Yeah.
Her mother's name is Joan, and
Uh-huh.
she keeps cloning her dogs and calling them Marley. Which I don't know why
Oh
I
my
wanted that in
gosh.
there, but it killed me. It was just like
Yeah.
it gives you an idea of why Marley wants the love,
Yes.
and the acclaim that would come with being a guru.
Yeah. Yes, for sure. So this one's definitely satirical fiction, and your first one was as well. So what is your favorite part about writing satirical?
I have never sat down and said I'm going to write satire. That has never
That's
crossed my mind. Like I no.
amazing.
The first book that everyone was like, "Oh wow, it's such satire," and I'm like, guys, I literally pulled directly from my own experiences. Yes, there were
True.
like the things people would say. They really said it.
Yeah.
Shoes were thrown at my head. Like the only part
Right.
that was really fiction was murders. Like,
Yes. Yeah.
I was not. I never. Boy, I just want try to write things that I find funny because
That's
listen, you're
cool.
writing a book. You're going to be reading that draft for 2 years
Mm-hmm.
at least 2 years. So you have to make
Right.
sure you're enjoying it, right? So if
Yeah.
it makes me laugh, I put it in. And like it sounds really dumb of me, but if you
No.
had said, "Oh, she's going to be a great satirist," no, 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 no. Like I even wasn't trying to be write satire. I just like writing ridiculous people. I like
Yeah.
characters who are just you want to hate them. It's
Yes.
more interesting to write than like a happy, sweet, everything's going great. Well, no, I want to write about the awful ones where things are not going great and they're
Yes.
ruining your life. I love those characters. So
Yes.
I don't have a satire process. It's more like, did I find this funny? Cool, let's put it in, and then kind of winging it from there.
That's amazing. Your answer is basically like, I'm just naturally like that.
I every time somebody like I was having breakfast with a fashion friend in New York, just like reunited, and we were talking about the fact that Fashion Victim was not a satire. It was like she's like, no, that happened. I was there. I was like, I know. So it was just kind of funny to me.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. So how would you describe Kismet in a couple sentences for people who haven't read it?
I'm so bad at the elevator pitch. It's a book about finding where you belong and who you are,
Hmm.
and I'm like, what can I give away? Nothing.
I
So
know.
it's about Ronnie trying to figure out her people,
Mhm.
and sometimes her people aren't human, sometimes they're
Yeah.
animals,
Yes.
and you know, it's life's a journey, I guess.
Mhm.
So
Yes,
for
but
me, the book is less about, poking fun at wellness, and more about this woman who feels like a fish out of water. Because
yes.
I think I've always felt that way, and it's the same
Mhm.
most in Fashion Victim. The main character feels like she doesn't belong,
Yeah.
and that's sort of like a running thread in my work because I feel like when you have an immigrant family, um, and especially for South Asians, I feel like we're between two worlds, right?
Mhm.
We're too American to hang out with our relatives and people
Yeah.
from South Asia, and
Mhm.
we're not American enough for Americans.
Mhm.
So where do you belong, right? So this
Yeah.
is the question I feel like I felt, and I mean, look, working in fashion and not fitting the physical or financial mold definitely also made me feel like an outsider. So I
I
definitely
bet.
wanted to include that into everything.
Mhm.
This has gone more than a couple lines. I'm sorry. I'm
That's
really bad
totally
at
okay.
elevator pitches.
Oh, you're fine. My next question was going to be what prompted you to write it, so you were kind of starting to answer that anyway.
Oh yeah. Well, I was out in this crazy place in Arizona, hanging with my dad, and there were no jobs for me here. It's not like there's a fashion industry outside of New York, really, in the US. And it was
Yeah.
like, I don't know what else to do with myself. I literally was like, Dad, I'm gonna try to write another book. Like my first one had finally gotten published. I was like, but I don't know what's gonna happen. Like, I don't
Mhm.
know if I need to go get a job at Walmart because that's like the only jobs out here are Walmart or nursing. And I was like,
Right.
okay, let's figure this out.
Right.
So I sat down and I wrote this book, and it took me 2 years. It was like I did 5 different complete drafts that I then
Wow.
threw away because I
Oh,
did not like it. So never be scared to start over, people. Start over. If it doesn't work, just start over.
that's
I'm
great
okay with
advice.
that.
Yeah.
Like that
Yeah.
had I been better at outlining, I probably wouldn't have had to start over so many times. So that's
Right.
the learning thing for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I feel like some people feel like in their writing, like, oh, I've spent so much time on it. Who cares?
Mhm.
Some cost fallacy, right? Just because you spent all this time
Yes.
on it doesn't mean you don't have to start over.
Right.
So that's where this book came from. I was trying to make Ronnie just an empowered woman, and that took a lot to
It
get her
did. It
from where
really
she
did.
starts as a doormat to moving to this point where she is her own person and
Yes.
she has her own life now, and she's in
Yes.
control, and it's great. So
Yes.
that for her and for me, it was a journey.
Yeah. It's a fantastic journey. So we will talk about spoilers now. So I always tell people to, if you haven't read it, pause and go read it and then come back. But if they're listening because
Plug
they've
your
already,
ears, everybody.
yeah,
Like,
yes.
plug your ears. You don't need
But
to hear this.
yeah, if they've already read it, they can obviously just keep listening. So early on, the book describes, I'm going to call her Sad Ronnie now too. It describes Sad Ronnie. It says she was saying yes to life, taking leaps of faith, and trying to be happy. She hated it. And I felt like that sentence like
Yeah,
set and solidified the tone of the whole book. So did you go into it knowing that you wanted to point out some of the absurdities of like capitalized wellness culture, or did you have a plot and
yeah.
you kind of put that in?
Oh, it was both. It was sort of both.
Hmm.
It was like wellness, the way we see it now. Wellness is an
Hmm.
empire of money, right? It's about,
Yeah.
let's buy this crystal and you'll be whole. Use this candle. Wear these caftans. It's buy,
Yes.
buy, buy. Is that
Yep.
wellness? Look, if it makes you happy, great,
It's
do it.
true.
I don't care.
True.
But let's be real. You can't buy your way into wellness.
Hmm.
Wellness is about healing your traumas. It's about physically and mentally and emotionally healing yourself.
Yeah.
And I personally don't think, a shiny rock will do it. Listen, I love a shiny rock. Give me a quartz, give me a diamond. I don't care. I love it
Yes.
all. All right. They're
Yes.
beautiful. Do I think that they imbue any kind of energy to me? No, I don't. If you believe
Right.
that, that's cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I also didn't want to, like poop on anybody's beliefs, right? So
Hmm.
for this book, I really wanted to focus on the scammers, the people who are taking advantage of people who want to be healed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because wellness is full of that, every industry is full of that. So
Yeah.
that was the focus, because for me it was important, because I love tarot, I love astrology, I love,
Mm-hmm.
I love witches. I think that stuff's cool and fun, and I will always be that goth kid from the 90s in El Paso, Texas, who loved that stuff, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to be like tarot stupid. How I can't believe anyone, no, like I wanted it to be
Right.
like working, infusing it with some of the, like the good healers in this book are tarot readers, and they are, witchy and woo woo, but they
Yes.
also legitimately care about people.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between them and Marley.
Yeah, it really is. Um, Ronnie is reflecting at one point on something that Marley said about how looking good was a big part of feeling good. So, how or why do you think the beauty industry like wormed its way into wellness culture?
Well, beauty and health were, so, just going by the fashion industry, beauty and health was like a section of every magazine together.
Right.
And wellness kind of came into that umbrella. I always say like every beauty vertical website would have a health section,
Mm-hmm.
because yeah, if you're healthy and you're working out, you know what, your skin might be great. You're going to be glowing because you're sweating. It's great. Endorphins are awesome. I say that because I just made myself work out, but but I think that in starting in 2016, I think that, like, it was a little bit earlier, but I think 2016 with the election really cemented that fashion was not a focus anymore. It was
Yeah.
almost like, ugh, you're going to focus on fashion when the world is on fire. What's happening? So I think a
Right.
lot of people shifted to wellness, because and I know
Mm-hmm.
people who are like in fashion and fashion PR, and then all of a sudden they're like wellness gurus, and I'm like, how did this happen? Like, I've hung out
Yeah.
with you. You're not a guru, but okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and it, listen, it all comes down to money. It's all about money for a lot of people, for a lot of the publications. And
Yes.
I don't mean and I'm trying not to curse. I don't mean to, because I curse like a sailor.
You can go ahead
I
and do
don't mean
it.
to, okay, I don't mean to shit on wellness. It's just, I
Yeah.
want people to understand the motivations of people that they are following or that they are buying from,
Yes.
and understand
Mm-hmm.
how it might impact not only their world but the greater world, at large.
Yeah.
And I think that's
Yeah.
something we like. You can't really get well via capitalism, like it's just
No.
not going to work. You have to figure
No.
it out yourself, and work with
Yeah.
people, and really put the work in to make yourself well,
Yes. Completely
whatever
agree.
well means to somebody. Like, I don't feel like there's like a
Right.
an archetype of well. It's more like whatever you think is
Right.
well.
Yeah. I think that's a really great point. So as the story progresses, a pattern kind of starts where Marley would do something that like causes anxiety or stress for Ronnie, and then we would get a story from Ronnie's past about something really similar happening with Shamim, or it would be before one of the two. So it gave us a
Mhm.
lot of insight into why Ronnie was kind of primed to be manipulated by Marley. So how did you come up with the idea to kind of pair the past and present like that?
I liked the idea of her basically being her aunt's servant, and then breaking free and becoming Marley's servant.
Mm-hmm.
And servant culture, I just have to be honest, is it's a thing in South Asian culture. Everybody in Pakistan that in my family that I know has servants. It's a thing. It's When my mother moved to here in the 70s, she was horrified that there are no servants anywhere,
Oh
because it was
wow.
so normal. So
Mm-hmm.
that Ronnie would become the servant makes sense, because that's, how a lot of things can be. And
Yeah.
it was just sort of like, you can't just glom onto this white lady who's trying to be a white savior, who is claiming she can help you and change your life, and it's going to go smoothly. Like, you're going to fall back into old patterns, because
Yeah.
we're human. We all do that, right? So
Yeah.
Ronnie has to fall back into old patterns, and then she has to break those patterns. So that is
Mm-hmm.
sort of how that came about for me.
So Ronnie also struggles to stand up for herself, kind of coming from that servant mindset, actually, that fits in with it. And she equates being useful with like longevity and getting love from people after like a lifetime of never doing enough for Shamim. So, do you think she was kind of primed for the toxic, scammy side of wellness culture because it taps into
Yeah.
your like feeling of not being good enough?
Yeah. I think so many of us feel like if we're not working hard enough, if we're not doing anything, if we're not useful enough, that people aren't going to want to spend time with us. And
Yep.
I think that's a mindset we all have to break out of. Like it's
Hmm.
okay to not be useful. It's okay just to be you, exist. You don't have to
Yeah.
produce things. You don't have to um, do everything for somebody else for them to love you. And
Right.
that's a challenge. Like I still have days where I'm like, I didn't do anything today and I feel terrible about it. Well,
Me
it's
too.
fine.
Yep.
Rest is good for you. Just
Yeah.
lying in bed sometimes is exactly what you need. So I wanted
Hmm.
Ronnie to go on this journey with me because I was feeling that way too. So it's like,
Yeah.
God, well, I'm not doing enough. There's these writers who are doing 10,000 things and I'm barely
Yeah.
able to finish this book. Like I'm not, it was a lot. It was a lot of me trying to figure that out
Yeah.
through Ronnie and figure
Yeah.
out how to just be, and that just
Yes.
existing is enough, makes you
Yeah.
worthy. It doesn't, you don't have to do anything to get that approval. But at the
Hmm.
same time, coming from the same background as Ronnie,
Hmm.
um, you're there is a lot of pressure in, South Asian families, especially to be productive, to not just be the a doctor, but be the best doctor. That you would come home from
Yes.
school and you got a 95. Well, why didn't you get 100?
Yep.
So there is this pressure on us to always perform at a
Hmm.
level that is very high and that is very toxic. That is
Yes.
very, that's something I'm still unlearning. And
Yes.
I have nieces and nephews now, and I'm like, I don't want them to feel that way. I want them to feel
Right.
like whatever they want to do is great. They don't have to do or perform at a level that can cause burnout or that can cause
Yes.
anxiety and depression, which is what it does. So
Yes.
it was sort of like working all of those issues into Ronnie.
Yeah. When you said that, I had the same experience. I had a 98% in AP chemistry,
Mhm.
and the question was, why is it not 100?
Which is
And I was
great.
like,
Yeah. And
right.
also, was yours a top grade? Because if it's not, you'd have to be the top. And it's like, and I think look, it's great to have ambition and it's great to teach kids to be ambitious, but it's also great to tell them that
Hmm.
failure is really good for you. And learning to fail is
Yes.
amazing. And
Yes.
if you can learn to do that, and I didn't learn that until recently. Like if you told me 10
Hmm.
years ago that I was going to fail out of fashion and to move out of New York, I would have been like, oh my God, why? But it
Right.
was the best thing for
Right.
me. It was like life
Yeah.
changing
Yeah.
it was like night and day.
Yeah. That's so cool. And if you do just have to like roll with it. If you can kind of roll with the failure, then it's like, what do I want to do next?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was really it. I was sitting there in my apartment with my tiny little dog, not leaving the house except to walk her, right? Leaving my apartment, and it was like,
Yes.
I have nothing to lose. Let me try writing. Maybe nothing will come of it, but
Yeah.
maybe at least
Yeah.
I have done something besides stare at the TV, right? Let's try it. What's the
Right.
worst that could happen?
Yes. That's really cool.
The worst, somebody might say no. Big deal. Everybody gets a no, so keep going.
Yeah, you can't be afraid of the no's either. That doesn't really get you anywhere.
No. So no is one of my
Yeah.
favorite words. I see it a lot. People are like, "Hey, can you do this?" No, I'm busy. Because I've
Yeah.
I've been
Yeah.
that person who would take on all the work, who would do everything, who would work 12 hours a day. And I had
Yep.
such massive burnout that I now guard my time very carefully. And if I start to feel like I'm
Yes.
approaching burnout, it's like, no, 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 not
Yes.
doing anything. Clear my schedule, rest. Um,
Yes.
so yeah.
Yeah, you've got to, yeah, because once you get burnout, it takes so much longer to like reset
It
yourself.
is. It's like you're in molasses and you're trying to climb out of it.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
you can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm totally with you on that part. So one of my favorite parts was when Ronnie, I don't know what I was about to say, was reading a magazine and she saw ads for Reiki and crystals. And she thought all about healthy living if you just buy one more thing. So,
Yeah.
how counterintuitive is it that some people have turned like wellness into like accumulating things?
I I think that's sort of the American way. You know, we're in this
Mm-hmm.
very consumerism moment the last like 20 years, you know, where buy
Mm-hmm.
this, buy now. Um, do I
Mm-hmm.
think that healers should be paid for the time? Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
This is different. This is more like you need this product, you need to do this. And I don't know if that is actually helping people or putting them in more debt,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
So there's
Mm-hmm.
definitely a difference. Like it's one thing if you go to a healer and you pay them because obviously their time is worth money. But
Right.
if you're going to somebody over and over and you're not feeling any changes in your life, it's not striking anything in you to
Mm-hmm.
improve your life, then I don't know if it's worth the money. That
Yeah.
said, do I give money to healers that I like? Yeah, especially black and brown
Oh
ones. I
yeah.
try, you know, especially you see them on Instagram, and I'm always like, all right, listen, I love
Yeah.
wearing oils. Let me get some of the oils from them. And
Yeah.
that I think is great. I think do what works for you, even if it means
Mm-hmm.
you're buying crystals, whatever. But be cognizant that um, that's not necessarily going to be the magic answer that you're looking for. It's not the golden ticket. You know, there's no
Right.
shortcut to getting well.
Unfortunately.
No, I wish. I
Um,
know. I'm like, I
yeah,
wish.
I do too. You kind of just have to keep living and figuring it out.
Yeah, and you know, you get migraines too. I think a lot of women have been neglected and ignored by the medical industry. You know, I've had doctors who are like, I've had migraines since I was 6. I've had them almost my entire life. They're pretty chronic, you
Hmm.
know, but I've got them under control for the most part. I've had doctors who are like, I don't believe you. You're just trying to get drugs. And I'm like, well, then give me
Yeah.
something else. I'm open. And like, I literally ended up
Hmm.
giving myself an ulcer because they wouldn't. And I had to pop 6 Excedrin a day and 6 Advils a day just to
Oh,
get through my days. Don't
oh,
do that, people. You will get holes in your stomach. So I think a
yeah.
lot of women turn to wellness because it gives us a sense of control. Like we're taking
Yeah,
back,
you're
we're
right.
taking back what people have taken from us. We are trying to help ourselves get better. And that's great, you know. I mean, it's sad that we have to do that, but it's great that
Yes.
people are feeling like they have more control now. That
Yeah.
said, I think we also have to look at how we're choosing to be well. You know, like I
Yes.
really am not a fan of the whole consumerism angle of things, but you know, it is what it
Hmm.
is.
Right. It's gonna happen. At least in America, to your point,
Yeah.
it's definitely gonna happen.
Yeah.
So later in the book, Marley's eyes turns into kind of like a way to examine how creating fear around outsiders in general puts so many people at risk. So did you know you wanted to explore that topic in the story, or was it
No,
something you just kind of realized fit in?
I think that was like post-election dealing with, you know, I live in a town that, you know, people have giant MAGA flags everywhere. And they've got MAGA flags on their truck, like huge full-size flags on their trucks, and they're at the MAGA hats. And it's like, you know, when I'm one of the few brown people around in this area, which is shocking because it's Arizona, and you think, oh, obviously,
Yeah.
no, that in the cities for sure, but in the smaller towns up north, it can be a little xenophobic. It can be, you know, like my dad and I don't leave our property; we stay where we are because we don't want to deal with people staring or people saying making comments. People get
Yeah.
mad at you for no reason. You're shopping, you say excuse me, and somebody starts yelling at you, and you're like, are you actually just yelling because I'm a brown woman trying to get around you? Like, I don't understand what's happening here.
Right.
So it was a lot of what I was
Right.
feeling living here. And look, there are wonderful people here. You know, this is not to say that every single person who lives here is like that, but I have experienced a fair amount of them, and I wanted
Right.
Marley's eyes to tap into that moment, um, because it's unnerving. You know, it is very unnerving coming
Mhm.
from, you know, a very diverse city where everybody hangs out with everybody to being here and being one of the
Yes.
few brown people around. You know, and it's like
Yeah.
I don't. This is scary. This is like legitimately
Mhm.
scary, scared for my life sort of situation at times. So I
Yeah.
wanted that to be reflective, but it was like there is definitely a segment of wellness that is very white, but also very white supremacist. And
Mhm.
we've seen that with the whole QAnon folks, you know, with the QAnon shaman.
Mhm.
So it was like, let's kind of reference that a little bit and see if that makes
Yeah.
sense to people and if it hits, you know, if it rings any bells.
So in the end, Ronnie is like
Spoiler.
actually empowered. Yes.
It's so funny when you write a book, it's so funny how much you absolutely forget what's in it. Because I'm now working on my next book and edit,
Right.
so I'm like, "Was it a knife? Is that what you did? I don't remember." Yes, yes.
I mean, I'm sure it is. Like you're in
That's
like two separate
yeah.
worlds.
It is, yeah, brain is a little overwhelmed, but yes. So she
Right.
empowers herself,
Yes.
and we find out who the murderer is, which I'm not gonna
Yes.
share. And
Yep.
then we find out that Ronnie has empowered herself before. And I think that
Yeah.
was a shock to some people.
Yes.
Whereas to me, I'm like, oh, it's gonna be so obvious. They're all gonna get this part.
I
But it was
I
like,
was
oh,
hoping that that's what it was. I was like,
yeah,
please let her
yeah,
have done that.
she did it. She did it.
Yep.
And that also contributed to her paranoia throughout the whole thing that people are gonna know me. They're gonna find out my secrets. They're gonna know I'm not good
Yes.
enough. Because she
Yeah.
legitimately had a terrible secret. And so which we
Right.
find out at the end.
Yeah.
So yeah, I sorry
Yeah.
all my aunts. I actually realized, so we use a lot of nicknames. We don't use like our my aunts are always like different nicknames, and I realized
Uh-huh.
after the fact that I do have an aunt named Shameen, and so I need to send her an apology because she's the nicest
Oh
woman on the planet,
no.
like just so lovely. And I would be like, it's not about you. I promise. I'll hear a name in my ear, and it's like, oh, that's the name I need. And so I always
Yes.
borrow from people, but it's not a reflection of them. But I'm just like, I'm so
Right, right.
sorry.
That would be the hard part about
I would
writing
never.
is like not writing anyone's names that you know.
Yeah, I literally don't even care. I'll go through Twitter and Facebook and be
That's
like,
good.
whose names do I want? Oh, that's a good name. And like mix and match the first and last names, and like go from there.
Nice. Nice. So, did you know you wanted to have the character arc from the beginning that like she would empower herself through a very different
Yeah.
method than like all the wellness methods?
Yes. Listen,
Okay.
I'm not a nuanced person. I'm not subtle. I'm more of
Yeah,
a
me neither.
sledgehammer type of person. So I was
Yes.
like, how would I do this? Well, I would murder somebody.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I felt like that was the ultimate way for her to be like, no, this is my life. I'm going to take control.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and it worked.
Yeah.
Yay,
Yeah.
Ronnie.
No, it did. It did. I loved it. I thought it was a good reflection of the rage she felt. And then also,
Yeah,
if you've ever felt rage yourself, it's cathartic. Like, because I'm never going to go kill
it
the people
is.
who disempowered me, but it was nice reading someone else doing it.
And I definitely, there is also always an issue when you're writing from your culture. You don't necessarily want to
Hmm.
portray people poorly because you're never
Right.
allowed to just have bad characters. It's always a huge reflection and statement. I was like, you know what? No, I
Hmm.
just want to have bad characters. And I also wanted to tap into
Yeah.
the fact that there is a toxic angle to the South Asian community, in the way you're not allowed to be independent from your elders. I definitely had that. I had very, when I was 18, my parents were very, very Pakistani, very Muslim, very controlling. And
Hmm.
I took off and
Hmm.
went to New York, and I was like, okay,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
isn't going to work for me. Peace out. So I
Right.
understood her rage, and my
Hmm.
father is not like that anymore. He's really chill. And it's
That's
kind of
good.
really funny to me. Like he's just
Yes.
become this very, very awesome, relaxed guy. So it was, but
Yeah.
I remember feeling that rage. I remember thinking
Yeah.
how much I hated every part of my life because I felt so controlled, and I wanted Ronnie to have
Hmm.
that moment where she's free from all of that.
Yes, yes. When you were talking about not wanting to like represent a whole culture badly in one character, and you're like, I just want to have the characters that I have. We recently saw
Yeah,
Jordan Peele's new movie, Nope, and
I
actually
haven't
that
seen it
review
yet.
that compared, okay, the review that compared you to Jordan Peele is kind of crazy because I thought that review was such a good review of it, but
By the way, I died when they said that, when I saw that. Yeah.
I
When I was
would
like,
too.
"Oh, Jordan Peele," I was like, "I'm sorry, what? How do I oh my god, I'm gonna
It
frame
was
that one."
such a good comparison though. It was a really good comparison.
I
But
I won't even pretend I'm on the level of Jordan Peele. I wish I were, and that's something I can work up to. Goals.
I I think you're there, but you can keep working for it too. If that means
Yeah.
I get to read more of your books. So Kiki Palmer's in that movie. yeah, so I saw an interview with her where she was talking about what she appreciates about Jordan Peele is he writes black characters and has black people in his movies, but the movies aren't about them
Mhm.
being black. It's just I'm writing a
Right.
really good movie and I'm going to choose to cast black people. So it was reminding
Yeah.
me of that when you
It's
said
not
that.
about necessarily the cultural trauma. It's just these are characters having to be black. And that was how it was for Ronnie.
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
her abusive relationship with her aunt could speaks to a lot of people. I think a lot, you might not
Yes.
have the exact same experience, but you
Right.
understand it whether across cultures. I think one of the
Yes.
things that publishing in general has to get better at when we're doing inclusive stuff and diversity is making sure that one character is not a statement. You want somebody writes a terrible mean white character, it's not a statement about white people. So it would be really great when we get to that point where a mean character who happens to be Desi is not a statement about Desi people. It's just
Yes.
this is the character, she's
Yep.
terrible, she just happens to be Pakistani. So that's hopefully
Yeah.
a goal that we'll see. I mean, I'm sure people are
Mhm.
gonna take offense to some of the things I wrote about, either about not just Shameen but also Marley. But it was more
Mhm.
like, let's talk about this behavior as opposed to saying,
Yeah.
"Oh, she thinks all Daisies are like this," because I don't.
Yes.
So, but
Yeah.
that's definitely a challenge.
Yeah, because you kind of included that when she after the blood facials, which that was very Jordan Peele-esque in my opinion. That was like straight out of like a horror
Those are real
film. Like it
facials.
was
Those are real facials.
I know
They're
they're
called
real,
vampire
but
facials. Yeah, I've never
yeah,
done one. I
no,
know that Gwyneth
I
Paltrow was
haven't either.
talking about them. I just kind of like the idea of using literally brown people's blood to be young, as like an
Yes,
overarching
yep,
statement about pulling from other cultures and not celebrating those cultures, but stealing from them for your wellness. So that was my
yes.
very heavy-handed way of doing so.
Yeah, yeah. And then she has kind of the bruises on her face, and then the next day someone's like, did your husband do this to you because of your culture? Or
Hmm.
that's at least her
Yeah,
implication. And Ronnie's thinking about like she did have her experience with Shamim, but then she thinks of her friend's parents, whose name I can't think of right now,
yeah,
who
Ferris
were
parents.
really kind. Yeah, and so she even then
Yeah,
was like, I wish people understood it wasn't just like one thing.
yeah, and also I think when you're writing characters whose background is Muslim, it is even more
Hmm.
fraught. And so one of the things I had said about Shameen was she's not religious, because I didn't want it to be about being religious, and she behaves this way. She just behaves
Yeah.
this way because she's a jackass. It has nothing to do with anything else. And in
Yes.
fact, she's not religious. She just puts on airs. Um, because
Yes.
I did feel pressure to make sure I didn't screw that up. I didn't want.
Yeah.
It's the same reason I didn't make the main character in Fashion Victim Pakistani. And people have asked me about
Hmm.
this, and the reason I didn't is because then she would be Muslim, and then if she's Muslim and she's
Hmm.
killing people, that's an entirely different book, and I would not have
Right.
gotten away with that book. I still don't think we could
Yeah.
get away with that book. So that was
Yeah.
the reason, and because you don't want to contribute when there is a responsibility to not contribute to the phobias that our society has, whether it's against brown
Hmm.
people or Muslims or what have you. Um, so it's
Yep.
a fine line to walk. I hope I
Right.
walked it, but I'm sure that there are things I said in there that people that I thought were glib and silly that somebody could take offense to.
Yeah, I mean that's always going to be the case. You can't help
Yeah,
that anymore.
you can.
So it does, especially when you're talking about like the idea of literally trying to steal or use their blood to make them feel better and kind of like steal from the culture without appreciating it. The book really focuses on how white wellness, maybe I'll call it that, in some ways has like not respected other cultures when it integrates it into wellness.
Right.
So, from your perspective, what is like a respectful approach that white people or just other cultures can take
I
to
think it's like,
incorporate stuff?
yeah,
Go ahead.
it is. It's definitely a challenge, I think, because you don't want to steal from cultures and then like a good example is what's happened with people using sage. We've all known that this is something that indigenous tribes do. It's their part of their spirituality
Mhm.
and their rights. Sage is an endangered plant now because so many people are using it. And can the
Wow.
people who is part of their culture, are they able to get it, you know? And that's one of those things where it's like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, that's crazy. So
Yeah.
I think we as consumers have to be cognizant of our impact, whether it's on stage or whether it's, you know, like, oh, I'm gonna do like in the book, I have them really into Rumi, who's this, you know, Muslim poet, a Sufi poet. And if you go on
Yeah.
Instagram, it's Rumi quotes all throughout, right? The funny thing is that those quotes are extremely watered down, and he was writing about his
Mhm.
relationship with God, and it's very he was very Muslim and devout man. So that we have these white women promoting this Muslim poet, but at the same time are vaguely Islamophobic, because I feel like Islamophobia is one of those
Mhm.
accepted phobias still of our culture, you know? And it's
Right.
like,
Yeah.
guys, if you're going to use this, understand who it comes from, understand what they're actually saying, and be open to that
Mhm.
culture. On the flip side, you
Mhm.
know, and I know every brown and black person has dealt with this. When I say be open, I don't mean going up to your one brown friend and peppering them with every single question you've ever had. Like, we're not Google. We're not, you know, the
No.
411 line for you. There
Yeah.
are books out there you can read that will answer your
Yes.
questions. Don't make us have to be the person to explain everything to you. Like, it
Yes.
happens so often that it's exhausting, just flat out exhausting.
Yeah.
So you have to
Yeah.
make this effort to, um, you know, to learn about other cultures and to learn where some of
Mhm.
these rituals came from. Like my sister,
Mhm.
I always tell this story because it makes me laugh. So my sister lives in Texas, and one of her white neighbors was explaining henna to her. And my sister was
Uh-huh.
like, "Are you joking?
Explaining it.
Like,
Oh my
you're
gosh.
explaining henna? Okay, okay, wow, wow." And she was just like, I can't.
Oh my
It's things like that.
gosh.
Don't go into these, you know, into your relationship assuming you know more than the other person, you know, and like that happens a lot. And it's like, stop and listen a little bit more. You know what I mean? Do your own research.
Yeah.
And I don't mean YouTube. I mean pick up a book and learn about these cultures and what the rites and rituals mean. Like learn the history of them
Mhm.
and why they are what they are. And I think that will go a long way in improving
Mhm.
this world where everyone is like, let me pick and choose from these different cultures because all these different little things will make me well. And it's like, you don't even understand why you're doing
Yeah.
those things, you know? So you
Yeah.
need to,
Yeah.
I think we all, I'm not putting white people on a spotlight here. I do the same thing. I was really into sage. And then
Mhm.
when I realized what's happening, it's like, oh, you know what? I don't want to buy anything with sage in it because I want to make sure that
Right,
it's
right.
available to the people who it's part of their culture. Um, so there are things
Yeah.
like, and also like there's things like crystals. Crystals are beautiful, right? They're wonderful. Why aren't we talking about how we're getting these crystals? You know, some of them
Mhm.
are mined, and they're mined by children, you know, in different
Oh,
countries. Um, are we okay with that? Like, how is that going to heal you when that crystal came at the expense of somebody else's life? So I think there are things
right.
that we need to look at in a way to that wellness is not just about you; it's about also your impact on the world. And so let's kind of figure that out. Fingers crossed, we
That
will.
Yeah, I think that was great advice there at the end. I love that. So where can keep people I am messing up my words today. Where can people find you so they can follow you and stay up to date with
You
everything?
can't. I'm in a hideout in the desert. No, I'm just kidding. I'm online a lot.
That's true.
I'm on,
Yeah.
and I guarantee I generally am very stoned when I'm tweeting. So please don't take anything too seriously. But like disclaimer, I'm on Twitter and I'm on Instagram, and my doggy is too. And you will see lots of photos of my
Yes.
dog. It's
Yeah.
Dramina, Drrramina for both, and my website, which I have to update. I know, but it's aminakhtar.work. You know, I try to be responsive to people when they reach out to me, unless they're just being poop heads and being mean. You know,
Right.
if they have questions or suggestions for books or what have you. Like I always try to shout out
Yeah.
other writers as much as I can. So if you want book
Mhm.
recommendations, Or
Hmm.
you just want photos of my dog, which listen, I do too. So happy to
Yeah,
provide those.
that's awesome. So I'll put those links in the show notes so people can go there and follow
Awesome.
you and stuff. Yeah, and thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much. Like your video, I was like, somebody likes the book. Oh my God. I was so excited.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm so glad.
So it's just, it's a trip to know that people are reading it, but then somebody actually like responds well to it and you're like, oh my God. Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Yay.
yes, yes. Everyone needs to go
Thank
read it.
you.
It's amazing.